What's up, folks? Dave Swift here for ClientAmp.com, and today we're going to talk about all of your WordPress problems, at least all of the problems that I hear about the most. They are the fact that WordPress is slow, it is insecure, and it is time-consuming. Now, I'm going to go into just a little bit of detail on each one of these problems, talk about why they exist, what the current solution is, and what an alternative solution might be for some people. I'll give it away right now. It is a static website. This is not going to be beneficial for absolutely everyone, but for the right use case, a static website can solve all three of these things nearly instantly with very minimal technical effort. All right, let's get right into it. Why is WordPress so slow just inherently? WordPress is slow because it's an application that has a database, and the application has to talk to the database every time someone wants information from it. So someone comes to your website, they say, hey, let me see your contact page. The application goes to the database and says, hey, load up that contact page. And then they spit it back over to the application, and then your end user finally gets it. There's just inherent lag there. There's really no way to get around that dialogue completely. Traditionally, what we do is use optimization plugins, things like caching, which will essentially take a picture of the database. So rather than having the database go and find the right information, it's already got a snapshot it can just give back to the application. But there's still a little bit of crosstalk there, and it's definitely going to be slower than just having hard-coded websites where everything is written in HTML and CSS, and it just displays on the front end for your users. Now, there are reasons that most people are not hard-coding their websites these days. It's the fact that there's so many great tools and CMSs to organize our data. More on that in a little bit. So WordPress is slow because it has a database and things have to go back and forth between the application and the database and your users. It's just a very difficult problem to solve. Problem number two is the fact that WordPress is insecure. Very similar to problem number one, this comes back to the fact that there's an application layer, there's a database layer, and these things can be infected, they can be corrupted, they can be hacked, passwords exist on both of these levels, and they can be compromised, right? So if we were to erase both the application layer as well as the database layer, so no more WordPress, no more database, things would inherently just get a lot more secure right away. But as I already mentioned, then we'd lose all of the features that we like and enjoy about WordPress. To solve this, we use security plugins and firewalls, as well as a rigorous update schedule for not only WordPress core itself, but also our themes and our plugins. You have to stay on top of those things. Otherwise, you are open to vulnerabilities and intruders can get in from the outside without you doing anything. I think that's the part that bothers people the most, is that you can do nothing wrong at all other than maybe miss an update. You can leave your website as it was and still get compromised, and your business reputation can be on the line here depending on what type of compromise it is and where they're redirecting your traffic to. It can be pretty ugly sometimes. All right, number three, if you haven't guessed it already, WordPress is time consuming because we have to keep up with all of this stuff. Not only are you going to spend time doing the updates, but then you have to check the compatibility between the updates because you've got plugins on your site and themes, and sometimes there's conflicts between those things as you update them. Conflicts that didn't exist before start to exist, and it's just a headache. If you're just trying to run a local business or an online business and you don't have the time and energy to basically become a WordPress expert, this can make WordPress feel like it is unnecessarily complex and just leave you scratching your head why everyone actually uses this platform. All right, so the solution we're going to be talking about in this video is a static website. Now, as I already mentioned, static websites don't connect to a database. They don't have an application. They're just hard-coded HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, the problem here is that not everyone can code. Back in the day, I used to use Notepad on Windows 95, and that's how I made my very first website. But I wouldn't do that today because as soon as a website gets more complex, organizing it is a total pain in the rear. Like, there's just no way you'd want to have hundreds of blog posts that you're all managing with individual HTML files. It would be a giant headache. So one way to bridge this gap is to use something called a static site generator. This allows you to use your favorite CMS, in this case, WordPress, and still have no publicly accessible database. So basically, either WordPress is going to be running locally on your computer, Or you can run it on your typical hosting plan, but you just make it inaccessible using something called a basic authentication or basic auth. This makes it inaccessible to anyone who doesn't have a very specific username and password. So obviously there's still security issues there. The best way to do it is to run it locally and then just turn the site off when you're not going to be updating it. Now, one other benefit of this that we've not talked about so far is cost. WordPress hosting can get very expensive because all of this conversation between the application and the database take a lot of server resources, or basically a faster computer. The faster computer you need, the more expensive the hosting is going to be. But if everything is already in static files, you can get away with almost no hosting at all. I'm talking like either completely free or absolutely pennies per month. And best of all, it'll cut down on your plugin requirements substantially. There are no need for caching plugins, no need for security plugins, but you should know that not all features of all the plugins you want to use will work. The sites that will work best for a static site generator are going to be local business websites that might just have a phone number to click and call, or maybe a simple form to fill out. Forms will work with static sites with a little bit of effort on your part. Or you have, let's say you're a photographer and you want to put your photos online to draw in new clients. You have a portfolio website that would be a perfect fit for a very simple static website, as well as simple blog sites that just have, text blogs with maybe some photos put in, and you might have comment system built in. That's doable with the solution I'm going to show you as well. But other than that, everything is fairly simple, right? There's not a lot of advanced features. The advanced features I'm talking about are going to be things like WooCommerce or e-commerce sites, membership sites, or online courses. Those are not a good idea for static sites. Now, if you really want to have a static website, but you also really want to have some of these features like e-commerce, a membership site, online course, or even something as simple as a pop-up, the solution in these scenarios is to use a software as a service for this part of your site. So an example might be you have a pop-up that collects emails when people load your homepage. Well, if you use something like ConvertBox to display that pop-up, that's going to work just fine because it's a third-party service. That's kind of how you can start to figure out whether or not something is going to work with a static site generator. Now, I'm going to give you a demo in a second here. We're going to get right into building a website. The plugin I'm going to be using is called Simply Static. This is a WordPress plugin, and there is currently a lifetime deal at AppSumo for their Sumo Days promotion. I made a video yesterday about Sumo Days, so go check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about what's going on there. But it's a pretty amazing promotion. They're giving away a Cybertruck. Things at AppSumo are going to be like 10% off. There's going to be a bunch of new deals being launched, so definitely go check that out. I'll have links for everything I'm mentioning, by the way, down below in the description. My thanks to AppSumo for making this video possible. However, if you're watching this video after the fact, definitely still go ahead and check out Simply Static. There's a free version in the WordPress repository, so you can try it out before you make a purchase. Now, Simply Static, it's actually pretty cool. It's very simple to use. It supports comments and forms with some effort on your part. However, you will need to use that basic auth system because essentially you will keep your WordPress system running in the background on something like a subdomain, and then they will use frames to inject the forms or the comment system on the appropriate pages. You will need the pro version of the plugin to achieve these features. One more cool thing about Simply Static is that it allows you to easily deploy your site regularly to cheap or free static site hosting using something like Cloudflare or Bunny, which is what I'm going to be using in this video. All right, so let's get into the demo. The steps I'm going to be taking here are to build a WordPress website, and I'm going to be doing that using LocalWP, which is a free solution for launching your WordPress website. You could, however, do this on your standard hosting plan and just build your site on a subdomain, something like static.yourdomain.com. And once again, if you're building on a subdomain, you're going to want to protect your site with something called basic auth. This is usually a checkbox inside of your hosting where you can just say, hey, turn on basic auth. You'll be able to set up a username and password, and then no one can visit your website without entering in that information. So obviously, make it very secure. Don't use something simple that could be easily brute forced. Next, we're going to be installing the Simply Static plugin. I will be using the pro version that I got from AppSumo. Then I'm going to click the button that says Generate Static Files, and we will deploy those files over to our static host. I will be using Bunny CDN, and I'll walk you through the setup process every step of the way. I've got a link for Bunny CDN down below if you'd like to check that out as well. All right, let's get into it by checking out LocalWP first of all. So here's the website for LocalWP. It's just localwp.com. This is totally free software. It's put out by the WP engine folks. Of course, we don't need their hosting for this because we're going to be deploying over to Bunny, but very easy to get started. Just click on this button to download. Choose your system that you use here. I'm using an Apple Silicon Mac. Click on this, you'll enter in your information and be able to download the file immediately. Once you've got LocalWP installed, you're going to click the button right here that says create a new site. We've got two options. We can create a new site from scratch or create from a blueprint. A blueprint is basically a template. I have not set up any templates for this computer, so I'm going to go ahead and hit create a new site here. I'll give it a name. I'll call it static demo and hit continue. I'm going to choose the preferred environment here, which is PHP 8.1 as well as Nginx. Quick note there is that Simply Static does not support Open Lightspeed. It does support Apache or Nginx. So the preferred environment is going to work out beautifully for me. I'm going to hit continue. I'll give it a username and password. You want to keep this still somewhat secure, even if it is local, just knowing that this could be the only point of potential exploit. So go ahead and use your favorite password manager to generate a username and password. I am not following that advice because I'm going to be deleting this site right after recording this video. So I'm going to hit add site here. And just in a few moments, this site will be available for me to begin using locally on my computer. I'll authenticate. It's installing WordPress right now. And there we go. My site is now up and running. I can click open site. And here it is, a fresh WordPress installation. I'm going to click on WP admin here, which will take me over to the admin page. I will fill in my username and password. And here I am logged into my WordPress website running locally on my computer, just like any other WordPress site that you might have on your hosting provider. Now I'm going to go ahead and build out a site very quickly here using a template system. I'll be using GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks to do so. First things first, I'll go over to my themes, add my new theme. Here's GeneratePress. I'm going to install it. Everything just flies because it's running locally. It's a really nice way to develop. Now over to plugins, you can see I have absolutely no plugins installed right now. Let me go ahead and add in a few plugins here. First up is GeneratePress Premium. Next is GenerateBlocks. And finally is Simply Static Pro. All right, so there we go. Here's my plugins page now. I've got 5 plugins currently installed. I'm going to go ahead and install a template from GeneratePress. Just going over to Appearance, GeneratePress, activating the site library. I'll open the site library. And here I'm going to browse for a template that I like. I'm going to go over to the business section. And here is a service-based business. This is a great example of a site that could fit very well with a static website. You can see they've got some images of other products they've done. It's basically just a brochure website, right? There's no one logging in and purchasing anything from this website. It's more to tell people about their services. So GeneratePress lets me know what plugins are required for this template website. And in this case, it's just GenerateBlocks. I do want to look out for something that would require something like WooCommerce, because remember, that will not work for Simply Static. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit Get Started here. It's going to go ahead and import everything from the website. I'll confirm the import, hit Begin, and in just a few moments, this site will be live and available to me. All right, so the import is now complete, and I pulled down my URL bar so it's in the frame here. You can see that we're currently on static-demo.local. .local means it's running only on my computer. It's not accessible to the outside world, at least with my current configuration. So let's go ahead and just check out this website we just imported. You can see it looks pretty good here. There are some text, some images, a gallery page. Everything looks pretty nice. Here's the contact page. Notice that there is no form here. If I wanted to add a form, I'd have to do that standalone. Note that Simply Static currently works with Contact Form 7, Gravity Forms, and Elementor Forms. All right, so now that we've seen what the demo site looks like, let's go back into the WordPress admin, and we're going to convert this over into a static site. I've got Simply Static over here. I installed it at the beginning of this demo. I'm going to click on Generate. Now, hypothetically, all I need to do is click this Generate Static Files button. But before we do that, we've got some settings to address. First of all, I've got a little notice here that diagnostics needs to be addressed. So in this case, what's going on is I know that my SSL is not set up properly. Let me just show you how to address this quickly if you're using a more modern version of macOS. So the first thing you'll do in local is make sure your site is selected, and then under SSL, make sure that it has trusted indicated here. Now, right now it just says trust, which means it's not trusted. I'm going to click on that, enter my password. And now if I go ahead and reload this page, it says trusted with a little check mark next to it. That's the first step, but we're not quite done yet. The next thing you're going to do is open up your keychain access. To do this, you can use Spotlight. Just press Command space, and then look for keychain access. Again, this is only for Mac users. If you're on Windows, you probably won't run into this error. But what you want to do is find that certificate. Up here, there's a certificates tab. So go ahead and make sure you're under System, Certificates, and then find the static site that you just created, and then go ahead and just double click on it. Under Trust, you'll click the disclosure triangle here and choose Always Trust. All right, notice that changed to a little blue circle there from a red one, and we should be good to go. I'm going to reload my static site here using HTTPS. It loads just fine without any errors. I'll log back in. And now if I go back over to Simply Static, choose Generate, the error message is gone. So very simple way to solve that. Now, like I mentioned, we could just go ahead and generate our static files here, and we'd have a zip file that we could go ahead and just upload to any server that we wanted. But I'd rather have it deploy automatically. This way I could use Simply Static as a backend for a blog engine, or just to keep my website running locally on my machine, and then just publish changes over to a folder essentially running on Bunny CDN. So to do this, I'm going to configure Bunny CDN. This will require the pro version of Simply Static to do so. So under settings, we'll go to the deploy option, and it's set by default to zip archive, which is great. You might want to keep a few zip archives and back them up to various places. But what I want to do right now is connect up Bunny CDN. By the way, if you want to use Cloudflare, you'll need to use their GitHub integration. It's very simple to do so, but it is more involved. And I just figured Bunny CDN is a very cheap and easy to use platform. So I want to use that for this video. So here's Bunny CDN. If you're not familiar with it, it's a very, very well-established and affordable option for both hosting files as well as a CDN to make sure that it loads fast all over the world. So that's a really good reason to choose this as an option. I've got a link down below for that as well. I'm going to go ahead and log into Bunny right now. And the first thing we need to do is get our API key. So if you've got your account created, just click on your little user avatar up here, edit account details, and then go to API key. We'll copy this to our clipboard, and then back over inside of Simply Static, I'll paste in that CDN key. Just a few more things to do here inside of Bunny. First of all, we're going to create a storage zone. So I'm going to hit create my first storage zone, and I'll give this a name. You might want to just name it the name of your website. I'm going to call it Demo Static, and the standard tier is completely fine. We'll choose our main storage region. We're going to choose the region closest to us. So for me, that's probably going to be New York. If I wanted to replicate this storage other places in the world, I could do so. However, I don't necessarily need that. So I'm going to just stick with New York as my main storage region. You can see that my storage cost here is going to be 1 cent per gigabyte. So very affordable. Let's go ahead and add this storage zone. All right, that's all for that step. Next, we're going to go over to the CDN option. This is what's actually going to be delivering our files as a web server, so to speak. And we're going to create a pull zone here. I'm going to give it a very similar name here. I've called it Static Demo, and you can see the URL. We can replace that with our own custom domain name. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Then under origin type, we're going to choose storage zone, and then we're going to choose our demo static storage bucket that we created in the previous step. So you can see here, our files will be uploaded to this storage zone, and then they're going to be displayed by this pull zone. That's basically our CDN that's distributing these files throughout the world. The standard tier is going to be just fine for this. I'm going to go ahead and just turn off some of these options. I don't really care about anything other than North America for this demo. And you can see the delivery cost is going to be 1 cent per gigabyte. So we're at 1% per gigabyte for storage and 1% per gigabyte for delivery. Very, very affordable. Next up, I'm going to need my storage host, my CDN access key, as well as my pull zone and storage zone. These are actually all very easy to find. To do so, we're going to go back over to Bunny CDN, over to our storage section, click on the storage zone that we created, and then we're going to go to FTP and API access. From here, we need the password. The password is going to be your CDN access key. Paste that in there. We'll need the host name. The host name is going to be the storage host. And then we need the pull zone as well as the storage zone. The pull zone is found by clicking on CDN. It's going to be that name right here. In my case, static demo. I'll copy that, paste it in pull zone. And next I need the storage zone. And we're going to repeat that process just by going over to the storage section and then copying that label right there. It is okay if they're the same, by the way. It just wasn't available when I was setting up my zones. The static demo was already taken when I tried it in the storage zone. All right, I am all set. I can hit save here, and I can begin deploying my files over to Bunny CDN by simply clicking on the static generate static files purple button over here. Before I do so, I might want to actually look at their optimization section. I can have it minify the code for me if I like, minify HTML, CSS, JavaScript. For now, I'm just going to leave these things turned off, and I recommend you leave them off your initial deployment as well, because if there are any problems with the minification, it's going to be hard to figure out if the problem was working with WordPress itself and maybe something didn't translate, or if the minification actually introduced the issue. So very first time, I recommend leaving all of these things off, but there are options to replace any hint of having WordPress on your site at all. So for example, if you wanted to replace the directory WP content, which typically hosts, say, your images and things like that, you could replace it with just content, so on and so forth. None of that stuff really bothers me right now, so I'm gonna just leave it as it is. But if you wanted to, there are a lot more options here to hide WordPress so that no one knows you generated your website using something like Elementor. But let's be honest, they could tell from the code, right? All right, so let's go ahead and hit that big purple button, and the files will begin generating on our WordPress website and then being deployed over to Bunny CDN. Now, the question you might have is, well, how am I going to find these files? How do I access them? Well, it's dependent on whatever domain you connect up over to Bunny CDN. Let me show you the options for that. So over on Bunny CDN, I'm going to click on the CDN option here, choose my pull zone, and then we can add our own custom hostname if we like. If you don't want to do this, by the way, Bunny's going to hook you up. You get your own domain name right here. It's going to be the zone name that you created, as well as b-cdn.net. And we can even force SSL, so you will get an SSL certificate. Even though you have a static website, you might as well avoid having that error show up on Chrome browsers if they even still do that. But if you want to add your own hostname, just enter it in up here, and you will have to set up a CNAME record to direct it over to the domain name that Bunny provides for you. I'm going to skip that step for this video, but I think it's fairly simple, and if you followed along this far, you probably can handle that on your own. However, if you have any trouble, just drop me a comment down below. I'll help you out along the way. All right, so my static site has been deployed. Let's go ahead and visit the demo. I've entered in the URL right here that I got from Bunny CDN. Press return, and boom, there we go. We've got our static site. I can browse around it. Everything loads very, very quickly as though it were hosted locally on my machine, because basically it is, these files are going to be tiny. Everything looks perfect here. I'm really impressed with Simply Static and how easy it is to get everything up and running. Even if you're not technically minded, this is something you could definitely do in a weekend without any trouble at all. So that is Simply Static. I think it's a great plugin. I'm gonna give it an 8.7. It's gonna provide a lot of peace of mind, cut down a lot of costs, and make websites load faster. Those are all good things in my book. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. My name is Dave Swift. Check out clientamp.com if you wanna work with me, and I'll see you in the next video.